Greetings, gamers. I'm Bedroth.
And I'm Skeletroy.
And you're listening to Very Good Music,
a VGM podcast.
Alright, welcome back, everyone. This is episode 4-6. And it has been a really fun season this time around. I've been getting a lot of really positive feedback about this sort of macro focus we're doing on composers. It's been really fun exploring some of my favorites, as well as a couple of people I wasn't as familiar with, like Ben Daglish, back on the episode with Lee. And then last time I did our first multi-composer focus of the season. And this time, we are taking it even further, and we are going to be talking about 5 different composers on this episode. As I think I mentioned last week, Shukapau is actually busy with some band stuff today, and so I am joined by a very special guest who is on the show for the second time, and he's going to help me talk about some of these tracks that were picked by himself and his fellow patrons. So, welcome back to the show, Skeletroy.
Hello. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I know you've been working on some stuff up there in the Great White North, and so you haven't been... Your thrash remix output has not been quite as strong this year, but you've been telling me that you've got some ideas for some things coming up. What have you been up to?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on, but, I mean, to be honest, I kind of filled my quota when I put out that Mega Man X3 album.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, it's so hard to believe that was this year.
That was a fair amount of songs in a pretty quick amount of time, so I was like, I can probably take a break, and then I put out a couple more songs, and I was just like, now I'm gonna switch everything around, so, yeah, things are still kinda not completely set up yet, but, when they are, things are gonna be so good.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man, both as a listener and also as your friend. I know it's nice to have things done. It is so hard to believe that Mega Man X3 album and our 2-part episode here on Very Good Music was this year. That just seems like a lifetime ago at this point.
Well, yeah, I was kind of surprised when you're like, Season 4, and I'm just like, wasn't I on Season 2?
Oh, yeah. The weird thing, though, was, of course, before my seasons were staggered, they weren't actually, in the year. I was doing a really weird schedule. So, Season 2 actually ended in February of this year, and then Season 3 started in March, and I cut it off this summer. But now, I've got a nice, neat setup where the odd season is the first half of the year, and the even season is the second half of the year, and I think that's how I'm going to keep it. So, yeah,
keep it simple.
But it has been crazy, and it's been an up and down year for us as well this summer. Honestly, there were a couple of times when I wasn't sure if we were going to be coming back for Season 4, but Shukapau was really eager to keep going, and honestly, I have had a lot of support, just both from my fellow listeners in the VGM community, other podcasters, and especially all the patrons, you included, sir. And this episode is our sort of seasonal thank you to the folks who keep the lights on. And I sent out a shout out on Discord and on Patreon and asked my patrons to share some who they thought were kind of unsung composers, or composers who either just due to the volume of their work or due to the recognition level of the games they composed for weren't on the same sort of level of notoriety as people like Yoko Shimomura, Nobuo Uematsu, Koji Kondo, or Western composers like Grant Kirkhope, Austin Wintory, Mick Gordon. And so I got back a pretty eclectic little group of folks who you and I are going to talk about this evening. So,
yeah, and I thought that the Patreon poll was kind of funny. any time that you include the option all of the above, I think most people are gonna pick it.
Yeah, and I think I knew that too, and that's probably why I included it. Once I saw once I actually had the list there, I was like, you know what? Well, number one, I'm honestly not sure I could do a whole episode on any of these composers. There are two exceptions that I'll talk about when we get there, but these guys just really don't have the same... Their discography is not the same size as the other composers we're talking about this season.
Well, no, and I mean, that's the thing, like, when you talk about somebody like Yoko Shimomura, like, she's got such a huge body of work that, you know, like... And, like, there's so many great songs that even the ones that aren't, like, there's enough good songs that doesn't matter.
Right.
This is almost like the equivalent of, like, your radio, like, one-hit wonders. Mm-hmm. Where they've got that one or two really good songs, and then the rest of the output's just, it's okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, with some of them, like, it just seems like they haven't put out enough work to, you know, to be able to get to that level yet.
I think so. I think if I were going to do a full episode on, for example, our first composer we're talking about, Mike Beckett, I would have to resort to playing some just pretty good music. But of course, our number one rule is everything has to be very good music. And so I do think that we definitely kept up, or we're following that rule today. So,
oh, definitely.
So the way that I did this is for a couple of these composers, the patron who chose them recommended a song for us to play, and so I'll be playing that song. And on some of them, a song wasn't requested specifically, and so I listened through and picked out a song myself. And Skeletroy has picked the other half. So every composer has at least one song picked by Skeletroy, and for his own selection for the poll, he actually is picking both songs. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the music? And so as we go through, I'm going to be eschewing the usual format of listing the publisher, system, year, and all that for each game, and we're just going to mention the game and the name of the track. I will still have all of that info in the show notes, and for some of them, we'll be mentioning them just sort of tangentially as we talk about them. But for the most part, we're just going to be talking about the composer, the game, and the track. But our first composer was chosen by patron Forrest Shamlian. This is Mike Beckett. And Forrest's chosen track is from a game that was one of his favorite games growing up. The game is called Bugdom, and we are going to listen to the track called Night. That was Night from the game Bugdom, composed by Mike Beckett, and this composer was suggested to us by Forrest Shamlian.
That was pretty neat.
It was. I think neat is a very good word for it. And most of the music from Bugdom it's sort of between ambient and the sort of really melody-forward music that composers like Koji Kondo were famous for. It's well put together. I think that this game came out around the year 2000, and so for the time, it's a very nice sounding track. But it's a really solid piece of music. I think it evokes the idea of night pretty well. Do you have any thoughts about, like, the instrumentation?
The first thing that kind of grabbed me was just that, that driving sort of just forward momentum. I really dug that, and then that, the low piano part comes in. And I thought that was kind of cool, because it gets a little dark, which, for night, makes sense. But then the high piano part came in, and it sounded really hopeful. So, it was a really neat juxtaposition.
It was. I think if this song were to paint a picture, that the high piano would almost be like the stars, like the lights in the night sky.
Yeah.
And so yeah. Really nice. Mike Beckett is the composer I think I found the least about online. He was active from 1998 to 2008, didn't compose a whole lot of games. I believe he is a Canadian composer. He worked for a studio called Nuclear Kangaroo Music, that I don't believe is active anymore, but it's in British Columbia. And his full name is Michael Dan Beckett. He was a freelance composer for games and film. He didn't do a whole lot, but he worked on some small film kind of stuff, some indie work. He was active from 1998 to 2008. He is most well known for the soundtracks to Cro-Mag Rally, which I believe is a Genesis Mega Drive game, for Bugdom and for the Enigmo series, which, to say that he's most well known for those, I had never heard of any of those games before looking him up, so that probably says something. All of those games were developed by Pangea Software, and I think probably another kind of high-profile game, I guess highest profile, at least the property it's associated with, is SpongeBob SquarePants: A Day in the Life of a Sponge, which the soundtrack for that is pretty much what you would expect. It's BGM, straight up, not really a lot of music that's going to take the spotlight in that soundtrack, but I'm sure that as you're playing through the game, it was nice to listen to. My favorite of his composition of his games was actually Sega Soccer Slam. The game itself looks like it's got some personality, and the music was pretty fun. But I did also think that the Bugdom OST was very nice. The Forrest theme is also a really nice song from Bugdom.
Well, yeah, and with the Sega Soccer Slam one, you could tell that, just because it's got the Sega name attached to it, he had a little bit more of a budget to work with. Whereas, I found that, these, the Bugdom one, it sounds very indie, I guess. It very much sounds like, wave files that he pulled off the internet in 2000 or whatever, and just kind of put a song together. I don't know if you heard it or not, but there were a couple times in that song where I heard the Wii Sports sound, when you select in a menu and it goes bring.
Huh. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I'm kind of playing back through it.
So yeah, I don't mean any disrespect to him. When I first got my first computer in '99, I did the same thing. Just grab a whole bunch of sounds and see if I can put them together and make cool music.
But yeah, you use more existing or stock sounds.
Yeah, that's kind of what that reminded me of.
Well, what song did you pick out from Beckett's body of work?
Well, I had to go with Nanosaur, just because of the name of it.
Yeah.
Because, honestly, I've never heard of any of these games from Mike Beckett's catalog. So I had to go with Nanosaur. And there were 3 games in the series. Okay. Nanosaur 1, 2, and Extreme, which may or may not be an expanded version of 2. Finding information on this guy was near impossible.
Yeah, and even about most of the games that he worked on, it was also pretty hard. But it seems to have been where most of the info that could be found was pretty much put together by really hardcore fans of the game, and that's it. So, but, okay, well, let's go ahead and get into the Nanosaur track you picked from. What is this track called?
The Level Exploration.
Was Level Exploration from Nanosaur, the first game in the series. Once again composed by Mike Beckett, and that song was chosen by my special guest, Skeletroy. Troy, why did you
think of that one?
Why did you go? Oh, but I will go first, and then we'll talk about why you picked this one. I liked it. It honestly, and this might be because of the whole dinosaur motif, it reminded me a little bit of the Turok sound. It's got that sort of mix of jungle and then also the rock guitar, the bass, the drums, which definitely this sounded like he had maybe a little bit higher budget than he did for Bugdom. With the drums and the bass, they sounded a little bit closer to... I have a bad ear for these things. I think I mentioned that before. Are those real instruments? Because to me, it sounds like they could be.
I'm honestly not sure about the drums, but I'm pretty sure the bass is. That thing sounded good.
Yeah.
Like when that bass first kicks in.
Really was the star of the show. Mm-hmm. I like how it fades in. At first you have sort of the jungle percussion, and then the bass comes in, and then you hear the drums sort of give a backbone to the whole thing. I like the evolution of this really pretty short piece of music. And I could definitely see this working well for like the background of a level where you're like going through a jungle, like hunting dinosaurs or whatever you do in this game.
Well, yeah, and that's basically why I picked the song. Like, for being so short, it really builds incredibly well. Starting out with just like the marimba and like you were saying, adding the bass and the drums and the guitar and like all those weird little effects going on in the background. A lot happens in a pretty short amount of time. And yeah, I really love the sound of the bass. When the drums kicked in, they sounded great. And that's basically why I picked this one. I mean, after going, oh yeah, I need to go with the game with dinosaurs with laser guns.
Yeah. This I think it's a good example of the difference in my mind, this is definitely not like dictionary definition here, but the difference in my mind between a music producer and a music composer. To me, this is the work of a really talented producer. There's not any super complicated like theory work here or composition. I mean, it's a pretty simple track.
There's not really even much of a melody, to be honest. Like, there's what's going on with the marimba, but, like, I wouldn't even call that a melody. You know, that's more just keeping pace.
But what is here is constructed very intentionally, and it's put together really well. He has a really good ear for the sound that he's going for. That's really what I get out of both this and about Bugdom.
Definitely.
Whereas when we move to the next composer, this is kind of exciting because I feel like this is a composer who is really just at the beginning of his career. The next gentleman we're going to be talking about is Satoshi Hori, who is a Capcom composer. This person was brought to us by SprintCade, my newest patron, and we're going to be playing 2 songs from the same game. To date, Hori he has only worked with Capcom. His first work was for the mobile game Tsukuren, and he has also worked on 1 game each in the Resident Evil, Street Fighter, and Monster Hunter series.
I was trying so hard to figure out which songs he did for the Street Fighter game. I couldn't find a list of, like, individual song credits, so it's just like, let's go with this one that he actually did.
Yeah. In my research, I'm pretty sure he did most of the stuff that wasn't a cover of the original, compositional work. I'm pretty sure he did the Way of the Hado side game, where it's like first person, you're throwing Hadoukens.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure he did all the music for that. But, I mean, other than Mega Man, it doesn't really get much bigger in Capcom than these 3 series. So the fact that he has worked on 1 game in each of these series, I think it bodes well for him and for the future.
Oh, for sure.
Resident Evil 7 is the Resident Evil game he composed for, and I listened through that track quite a bit, and I just could not land on anything. The thing about the Resident Evil games is they're so background, and they're so ambient, and they do exactly what they should do in a horror game, but it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't make for very good just independent listening. Street Fighter, kind of the way that you were, I wasn't 100% even on the Way of the Hado stuff that I found, but the main reason we're playing 2 different tracks from Monster Hunter, you've explained your reason for choosing a Monster Hunter track, but the other track that we're going to be listening to, and the one I think we're going to move to next, is SprintCade's pick, and this is his favorite song from the soundtrack. From Monster Hunter Rise, we're going to listen to Beacon of Peace. Once again, this was composed by Satoshi Hori.
レベアリーナロースターにあるシビリエケフィラオネトフィラエフェラディオソンカメセノラエラトイマティアシテルオネトゥイラエビラティエソクラオフィアメレジェテノフィラオノミフィアメビシレレガルコイビネラテルシミアメトプロシバロスタエノシリエフィラエスティクアフレソトゥオジフォリエイノレ
gorgeous.
Yeah, well done. Well done, SprintCade, with that pick. That was, once again, Beacon of Peace. This is the credits theme from Monster Hunter Rise. Man, that was good. This is composition.
Oh, I don't think I could think of a better credits theme like that. That was perfect.
Yep. And it showcased, there were some big swelling emotional moments, but then when it pulled back and it was just the piano, there was an oriental sounding strummed instrument in there as well that I couldn't really place. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this one? What have you got to say about this track? You can always say more musically than I can.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, quintessentially, you know, like I'm saying, like, that's the perfect end credits. Like, that's, you know, the sort of song that just... I haven't even played this game, and I feel all the emotions, you know? I know, like, some people really don't like vocals in video game music, and, I mean, credits themes are an exception a lot of the times. Yeah,
I have an interesting relationship with vocals in video game music. For some reason, at least with some people, I've gotten the... Prof. Jeff actually once accused me of not liking vocals in video game music. I don't really know where he got it from, but I must have said something at some point. For the most part, I do prefer instrumental video game music. But then there are tracks like this. Like you said, credits themes are an exception, but there also are sometimes just some vocal tracks that are really funny, like really good in the moment. Of course, you got the Great Mighty Pooh from Conker's Bad Fur Day. There's we were talking about Grant Kirkhope a little bit before we started recording. There's like a phantom, like an opera ghost who sings in Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, and that's that kind of thing. I think it can add an element of humor. But you're right. In this case, the vocals just complement the instruments so well, and create this sort of, you know, the type of emotion you want from a credits theme.
Well, yeah, and I mean, another thing about that is, you know, just because it's, you know, in a different language, like, I listen to a lot of world music, like mostly metal bands and whatnot, but, you know, like, I listen to a lot of Japanese bands and, like, Italian bands, and stuff where, you know, I'll show it to my friends and they'll be like, well, this is really cool, but I wish I knew what they were saying. And, like, I get what they're, you know, I get that point on the one hand, but, like, just listen to it like it's another instrument.
Exactly.
Like, those vocals in this song were just gorgeous. I didn't even need to know what they were saying. Like, that, it was just a beautiful instrument to go with a beautiful arrangement.
Well, and it's kind of like... One thing I always think about, there are two songs that come to mind when I have friends who have said the same thing. Growing up in Texas, I've heard a lot of Mexican, Spanish, and Latin music, and my dad has talked about, you know, not liking to listen to songs where he doesn't know the words, but then he'll go, you know, onto his rock and roll show and play La Bamba. And the Gypsy Kings, of course, with their most well-known, I think, in the States, big mega hit is Bamboleo. You don't have to know what they're singing to just want to move to that song. And
exactly.
And this just, it is so quintessentially Japanese. Like, this could be an anime credits theme. It almost sounds like it could be something like from Nier. It's really good stuff. So for this particular soundtrack, it looks like Hori was also the music director of sorts. He wasn't the full-on sound director, but he was in charge of supervising all of the music-related elements of Rise. He created musical concepts for each monster and directed the other composers on some of the work that they did. And, of course, did some of the composing himself, like on the two themes that we're playing tonight. He mentions in an interview on the Capcom Unity website that they used a lot of traditional Japanese instruments along with, you know, the standard orchestral instruments that you'll hear. And he talked about recording orchestral performances. And of course, being with Capcom, like you said earlier with Sega, he had quite a bit of a budget. They did recording in Japan, LA, and London. And I thought one thing that was pretty cool is he said for particularly fearsome monsters and music that required a large sense of scale, they mainly used Abbey Road in London, which, you know, that's epic right there.
Yeah, that was cool.
This, but just really, really good stuff. And he mentioned you talked about, you know, the vocals in this track. He mentioned that the game's director, Yasunori Ichinose, which that name just right there sounds like he should be a composer because just of those two names, but that he wanted to have vocals for every piece. And so while Hori wanted to pay the proper respect to the existing music in the series while also creating new stuff, he had to work vocal themes into those existing iconic pieces of Monster Hunter music because of the game's director wanting that to be an element in everything. And so I do imagine that would be a challenge. This is a long-running and storied series in Japan. I've only ever played Monster Hunter 3, or Tri, before. Do you have much experience with this series at all?
I only actually ever played, I don't remember which one came out on the 3DS.
I think that there was a version of Tri, but also 4.
I liked it okay.
Also 4, I think, was on the 3DS.
I don't know. It just, honestly, just didn't click with me. Like, I know it's got a huge following, but, you know, not every game is for you.
That's kind of my experience, too. I feel like this is a really big, like, online multiplayer game, because if you can get friends together to hunt these monsters, that's supposedly the ideal way to play these games. Now, SprintCade also, just to give him a shout out, he gifted me and Shoot Kapow download code for Monster Hunter Stories 2, which I think is probably more up my alley gameplay-wise, and I have yet to boot it up because I barely have any time to play games, but it is on my short list. So, Kate, I am going to be getting to that soon. But for now, why don't we get to your pick from this game? What are you going to be bringing us today, Skeletroy?
Well, I did initially want to go with the name puns again, because they had a song called Meowcenaries, but maybe if you guys do another cat episode, you can put that on there.
Well, you know, I haven't picked out a blooper reel track yet, so maybe I can throw it in there.
But the one I went with is called Magnamalo.
Okay, that was the Magnamalo theme from Monster Hunter Rise, composed by Satoshi Hori. That was intense. That was definitely a monster fighting theme.
Oh, for sure. To be honest, I found it kind of difficult to pick a song, just because they were all so good.
This is a really, really strong soundtrack. I could put together a playlist, I think, of music just from this game. It's not really the kind of playlist I would normally put together, because so much of what I play is either it's that old school melodic type of sound, or it's kind of a rock-esque sort of tune. We'll be talking about more of, I think, both of those kinds of things next week when you come back, but we'll talk about that a little later. It reminds me so much of Howard Shore and his work on The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I can hear that.
I think just because it leans heavily on the strings and the vocals, with a little bit of woodwind in there, but you also have the traditional Japanese instruments, and of course Shore incorporated some world instruments into his scores for things like with the orcs and the dwarves. I think if there had been more of a focus on any kind of sort of Eastern or Oriental themed culture in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, that the music might have sounded something like this. It's definitely well put together.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, this soundtrack, like, I'll be honest, I listened to it front to back. Like, I'm honestly only vaguely familiar with Monster Hunter as a whole. Like, I don't know the music at all, so, like, any of these reinterpretations are brand new versions to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, the thing that captivated me at first, because the Monster Hunter game I played for the 3DS didn't have, like, this, like, Japanese vibe to it at all.
Yeah.
So I started listening to the soundtrack, and, like, I was instantly captivated. And then, like you were saying about, like, the recording process, then I start hearing, like, the orchestral stuff come in. And, like, with this song and a few others in particular, like, a really strong, like, Persian influence. And again, like you were saying, not the most melodic piece, like, it's a boss fight. It's, you know, it's more meant to have a whole bunch of pieces that it'll go through so that you don't get bored of the song while you're fighting this monster for 15 minutes.
Right, yeah, this is a really nice looping song.
But every single one of those sections are just fantastic.
When I did my bonus episode this summer about the songs featured at the Tokyo Olympics, there were a couple of Monster Hunter themes played there. And probably, if there is a main theme across all of the Monster Hunter games, it's probably the song Proof of a Hero. And I played the Monster Hunter 4 version, I believe, on the Olympics episode, because it sounded like the original Proof of a Hero, but just like the ultimate expression of it.
Okay.
From what I understand, the Rise version of that wasn't very well received by the fans, but I think that's because it was such an extreme departure. It's definitely not anything to do with the quality of the composition, because I thought it was really, really cool. Again, I don't have a whole lot of personal attachments to the series, but there's definitely more of a Japanese flair to Satoshi Hori's interpretation of the Proof of a Hero theme. And so, I don't know, for me it was really cool. It was nice hearing that different version of it. But I can also see, like, I guess it's harder, when somebody reinterprets a classic theme that you love a lot. I think sometimes they can get away with it, like when Yoko Shimomura did her own interpretation of Vega's theme, and it sounded so different from the original, but it also sounded almost like the fully realized version of itself. That was done by the same composer, and so I didn't mind as much.
Well, yeah, it's still her song. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not a cover if it's your own song. You know, it's just your own reinterpretation of it. And I think in that way, people are more receptive to things like that. Mm-hmm. Whereas, when you hear somebody else take this song that you love, and it's like, well, how dare you?
Yeah.
Who told you that you could do that to my song? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, people get attached to things like that. I mean, look at any reboot of a movie or a TV show.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're pretty adamant about the old Ninja Turtles.
There is a real soft spot for me.
But with every one of those reboots, you know, it's so divisive. There's people that will cling to the old, there's people that will adapt to the new, and there's people that just sort of go with the flow.
Yep. Yeah, I don't remember why it came up, but just to get off on that tangent really briefly, there was some talk recently, I think it might have been on Twitter, on some of the things I follow, where people were asking, like, favorite version of Turtles and things like that, and there's a lot of love for the 2002 version, the sort of darker reboot that they did in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
And it does follow the comics a lot more closely. Since I was in just the perfect sweet spot for the cartoon that started in the late 80s, that does have some nostalgic value for me. But for my money, I think the series that I really enjoy the most is the 2012 reboot, the CG animated one.
Yep, yeah, that one was really good too.
It was so much fun. The voice acting was just fantastic, and I watched it with my kids, and so I think that's also probably quite a bit. I just haven't gotten into Rise of the TMNT. I probably would enjoy it if I watched it, but I saw the pilot and it was just so different, and I wasn't really ready to jump into something so different right after finishing the series before. But I mean, it's Turtles, and I can't say.
I know I shouldn't be biased, but I hate the art style.
It's so different. It's so different than anything it's ever been. But there is some really good voice talent on the show, and so I think that might be what wins me over if I do dive into it. I am still super excited about Shredder's Revenge coming out next year. That's going to be so great. And the music, of course, is going to be fantastic with T-Lopes behind it. It's going to be good stuff. So, but you know, I think that Satoshi Hori coming into these series that have such a pedigree behind them, and being not just able, but being willing to add his own voice and sort of put his own spin on some of these things, it's pretty impressive, and I'm excited to see sort of where he goes. If Capcom, say, like, is brave enough to try out a new IP and wants to put somebody on it, I think that he would be a really good fit, and it'd be nice to see him do something that's just his, that's not, you know, building on a legacy that's already there.
Oh, for sure. But when's Capcom gonna put out a new IP?
Yeah, the big studios are just so established that you don't see that too often anymore. The next composer, though, that we're going to talk about is a bit of a legacy in and of himself. His body of work is not as famous because he's never been attached to one of the major studios. But I was able to find out quite a bit about him, and he's pretty well known in the Japanese computer composition market. He also was associated with Treasure for a little while, and I am talking about our recommendation from Carlos, Kung Fu Carlito. We are talking about Toshiya Yamanaka. And I think in this case, Carlos did not give us a song, so I think I'm going to let you play the track that you're bringing first. Just really briefly, were you familiar at all when you started looking over this with any of Yamanaka's work?
No, like, to be honest, it's, and I mean, with, like, this song in particular, I love, like, old school shoot-em-ups. And to be honest, like, I feel like as a genre, like, pound for pound, they have the best soundtracks. So you take a shooter soundtrack, and everything that I've ever heard from the X68000 is just, it sounds so good. It's almost like the Super Nintendo and the TurboGrafx 16 had a baby that was more powerful than either of them. I need to dive into the library of this system because everything I've heard just sounds so good. And so this is a game that has some terrible English to it.
A lot of these, like the PC-88, the FM Towns, the X68000, a lot of them had they were either shmups with bad English, or they were adult themed games. And one of these seasons, these even seasons, I'm going to do a season-long focus on systems, and so perhaps when I do the X68000, I can bring you on, and that can give you an excuse to really dive into the system sound. I'm with you. Everything I've heard from this system is really fantastic. It's so outside of my personal experience, just game-wise, and so I don't have a lot. But whenever I get to feature something from it, it's really exciting to me. We talked a little bit both on the Koshiro episode when we talked about the PC-88, PC-98, and last week, or a couple of weeks ago with Lee, with Ben Daglish, when we talked about like the Commodore 64 and the Amiga. It really is interesting that compared to their console counterparts of the time, like the NES and the SNES, and also the Master System and the Genesis, it's really crazy how much more advanced these PC systems were in the sound department. And it really does come through, I think. Like, I think the SNES might have been capable of higher highs, but it was also definitely capable of much lower lows. And I think Koshiro and Yamanaka both actually complained some about what they had to deal with the SNES. Koshiro with ActRaiser, and Yamanaka with Prince of Persia, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I think we've given him a pretty good introduction here. He was active from 1988 through 2003, and your soundtrack is a little bit closer to the beginning of his career than my track will be. Why don't you tell us what you have brought for us to listen to from Yamanaka-san?
All right, let's see if I can get this right. This is Destructive Note from Night Arms, the Hyblid Framer. God knows what that means.
Well, that was Destructive Note from Night Arms for the Sharp X68000, composed by Toshiya Yamanaka. And I don't know if this is an alternate title for the track or what, but another title that I have seen for this particular track is Slapping Ball. Which I'm going to leave it at that. This is good stuff, man. Yamanaka has this sort of jazz rock sound that is totally Carlos's jam. I think I can see why he recommended Yamanaka for this. And yeah. What do you think? What do you think about this track made you want to bring it to the show?
Probably that like synthy guitar solo. Like I'm a sucker for programmed guitar solos. I don't know what it is. You know, like you listen to like the title theme from Maximum Carnage. Mm-hmm. That's got that awesome solo to it. Yeah, that's basically what it was. I like the sound of the song.
Yep.
That's why I was gonna go with another one. But again, you know, like I always go to the title first, and then I'm like, oh, I hope this is a really good song. Because there was one called Banquet of Pterodactyls.
Yeah.
And it was an okay song, but what a title!
I remember seeing that title. I listened through most of Yamanaka's discography, and this is the composer. I could do a whole episode about Toshiya Yamanaka. He's got a really, really distinctive sound that I think evolved through his time as a composer, and it's just really good stuff. He mentions being influenced early on by Western rock and also, you know, artists with sort of a jazzy feel to them. He referenced Carlos Santana, Steve Vai, Kazumi Watanabe, and Larry Carlton as some of his musical influences.
Right on.
And I think that you can definitely hear some of that in, like you said, that guitar solo. It's really, really good stuff.
Well, even in the rhythm to it, too, like it sort of had, you know, like this sort of dancey groove to it, very Santana. Mm-hmm. I can hear it now that you've said it.
And this game was published by Arsys Software, which was also known as Cyberhead. That was the first publisher or developer that Yamanaka worked with. His first game was Reviver for the PC-88. Now, he didn't go with them full-time until they developed the SNES port of Prince of Persia, which of course was on pretty much every system at this time. He mentioned that working with the Super Famicom for Prince of Persia was annoying. He also said that it was a very difficult process because of how he was so used to working with FM audio on, like, the PC-898, the X68000, and systems like that. And then he moved over to the SNES, and he had to work with PCMs. And this was sort of the same thing that Koshiro talked about. Koshiro would compose, when he composed for ActRaiser, he composed the stuff on a PC-88, and then he essentially sort of jury-rigged that into a soundtrack for the SNES. And Yamanaka seems to have done the same thing with the Prince of Persia soundtrack. And now, I am not super familiar. I've heard it talked about on other shows. Pixelated Audio does a really good job of explaining this kind of thing. What do you know about, like, the difference between FM samples and PCM hardware and things like that, like composing for one versus the other?
Well, I mean, basically, you know, just to try and simplify this as much as possible, like FM synth is frequency modulation. So that's, you know, your basic, like you take, like, your square sound or your sawtooth or, the old sounding video game music that you hear, like the NES,
yes,
like the Genesis, like the Turbo. Those are, I mean, there are exceptions because there's, you know, hardware and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, those are all frequency modulation. Like, they're not actual instruments, they're just representations of them using manipulation of audio. Whereas PCM is, to simplify it, it's basically samples. You know, like you'd record like strings or a bass or like a drum sound, and for the Super Nintendo, you have to bit crush that.
Oh
thing.
Yeah, super compressed.
And I mean that's why, you know, as the Super Nintendo like went later into its lifespan, and you know memory size is increased, the sound got a lot better. Like there's. But I mean that's the thing. Like you need to be able to have the space to store all those samples. And that's what makes it tough.
And yeah, and unless you had either the technical wherewithal or the budget or the time to do something like that, it was just really, really hard. Koji Kondo had sort of an upper hand because he was working for, you know, the house that built the SNES. Shimomura came to it fairly late in the game when she was composing with Square, you know, and she could build on what people like Nobuo Uematsu and Yasunori Mitsuda had already done with her SNES work. Koshiro actually did not compose a whole lot for the SNES, and this was, Prince of Persia was Yamanaka's only soundtrack for the SNES. I do want to mention, before I get to my track for him, one game I was interested to see is the cult classic for the N64, Sin and Punishment, which is, I believe that's an on-rails shooter-style game. I've never played it, but it was released in 2000, and it is a cult classic. There's a lot of love for Sin and Punishment in retrospect. I listened through to it, and the soundtrack is really... It's not super melodic. It's very atmospheric to me. I think it would have fit well, knowing the type of game and sort of the aesthetic that Sin and Punishment had, but that's the reason I'm not playing anything from it on the show. Did you ever play Sin and Punishment on the 64?
No. I mean, as you know, I'm not the hugest N64 fan.
Oh,
but,
right.
When it came out as a digital download for the original Wii's eShop, I was gonna download it, and I never had the Wii points to do so, because that was before they had PayPal and whatnot attached to it, and I was like, I gotta...
Yeah, I've almost gotten it a couple of times.
I don't want to go buy a Nintendo card, so yeah, it's just one of the... Yeah. But yeah, it was one of those games that I meant to play because I loved Star Fox 64. That's one of the games that I'll defend the 64 to the death for. And I mean, if Sin and Punishment's also a rail shooter, then yeah, why not? But yeah, I never got to it, and yeah, just kind of slipped out of my hands when they shut the Wii shop down.
I hear you. As much as I love Star Fox, rail shooters are not my favorite genre, and so that may be why I never picked it up. There was always something else, a platformer or an RPG or something else that I knew would get my attention more. But yeah, it definitely... There is I don't know his name, but there's an assist trophy in Smash. This little guy who zooms around the screen and fires lasers at you, who is like the protagonist of Sin and Punishment. And so it even has some representation there. I think it's either a first or second party Nintendo game, so that's pretty cool too. Now, his last official game came out in 2003, and that is the game I'm going to be featuring a track from. The game is called Dragon Drive. It was released for the GameCube, and that is all that I know about it. I have no emotional attachment to this game at all. I actually never owned a GameCube. I did rent one a few times the summer after it came out and played through Sonic Adventure Battle and Smash with a good buddy of mine over that summer, but never owned one. There's some really, really great stuff on the GameCube, and the soundtracks are really nice. But I think what you're going to hear coming from that Night Arms track is just how consistent Yamanaka stayed with that jazz rock style. But we're going to listen to, from Dragon Drive, D-Master's Shot, looks like is the full name of the game. We're going to listen to the track Frontier. That was Frontier from Dragon Drive, composed by Toshiya Yamanaka. And this whole soundtrack, this sound is pretty indicative of the OST, but this one, just the synths and the guitar and everything that they do in this song was just a lot of fun to listen to for me. What do you think, Troy? You had mentioned being kind of a sucker for guitar solos.
Well, oh my god, I had to stop myself from laughing. Because the like that synth guitar solo kicked in, and I was like, is he still using the 68,000? and so then I looked up at the YouTube video that's playing, and it shows the box art for this game, right? And I just pictured the lead guy on there, like, holding a keytar. And so every time I looked at that, that's what I saw. Like,
oh, that's fantastic.
I really dug the song. But like hardware aside, like it's the same.
It is. It's really synth heavy. He was not going, orchestral or real music. This is still, it's 80s as hell.
This is who he is. This is what he does.
Exactly. And like he knows his area, and he does it really well. This sounds like something that could have been in like a Marvel versus Capcom game.
Yeah.
It's got that same sort of jazz rock, that fusion style to it.
Yeah, because it's also got that like really high like pitch shifted synth.
But good stuff, and Carlos, hopefully you're happy with these picks. I feel like this stuff is right up your alley. And one thing I want to mention that I thought was pretty cool, like I said, this is Yamanaka's last official title. He no longer works on video game music. He did say he would take the opportunity if it came up again. He did come back in 2013 for an album that served as sort of a sequel to the soundtracks of some games that he had worked on the PC 98, 88 and 98, and that is the Star Cruiser series. In 2013, he came back for an album called Star Cruiser Yamanaka Toshiya Works. And I got this for an interview on smupulations.com. He says that the company was... releasing a CD wasn't the original plan. But the copyright holder for Star Cruiser wanted to preserve their copyright and do something with the title. And so after some back and forth, they settled on the idea of doing a soundtrack. And so he wrote all new music for the series but there was no game. It was just a soundtrack, as if there were a new Star Cruiser game. And so I thought that was really cool. I didn't listen to any of that because I actually didn't even find the album until after I was doing some research on it when we'd already picked our tracks. But I thought that was really cool, and I am going to go, I think, and seek that out. He said that because of the hiatus he had taken from music, he actually had really bad writer's block, and he wrote all of the first songs he wrote, which was pretty much enough tracks to fill up the album. He tossed them, and he went back to the drawing board and redid everything. And it took like 2 years for the album to get finished. So, really, he definitely puts a lot of thought into his work, and he doesn't want to let something go if it's not going to be really good. And I definitely mad respect for that. So, anything else about Yamanaka that you would like to say before we move on?
Honestly, I don't really know enough about him to say anymore. I really dug the music.
Yeah, I think we hit the high points. And of these first three composers, I really enjoyed all of it, but just this style resonates with me so much. So far, this has been my favorite pair of the night. This is just a whole lot of fun. But the next artist who we were talking about is one who is really special to me. This is the only one of these folks who I know personally. We've never met in person because we live literally half a world away from each other. But I have talked to him so much. His voice has been on my show. My voice has been on his show. And I have talked before about Voltz Supreme and his Ascent VGM Dream Stream Machine podcast.
And I was actually able to get some sound bites from Voltz that I think I'm going to play the first one of now. We will let him introduce himself here really briefly, and then we will also have an introduction from him for each of the tracks that we play.
G'day Bedroth and Shoot Kapow. Voltz Supreme here, sending you some love and intros all the way from down under. I've been really enjoying the season of artist-focused episodes so far, so yeah, keep up the good work. And look, firstly, I want to say a big thank you to you guys. Thank you so much for playing some of my tunes on your show. And secondly, an even bigger thank you to your Patreon member who has made this excellent suggestion.
Yes, Ryan, thank you once again for that.
And actually, I have had the opportunity to feature one of his tracks on my show before. Last year when I did VG International, my 10th episode, which we recorded with Ed Wilson of the VG Embassy, I played a track from Caveman Boy, because we were featuring composers from all around the world, and Voltz is Australian. And Voltz was recommended to us by my patron Ryan Steele, who is also a composer and who I interviewed last season for Catlandia. So there's just all kinds of podcast listener composer love going on, because also I'm talking about this with another composer friend of mine who composed my theme song. So yeah, this pair of tunes is really exciting, and I think I'm gonna let you play your track first. And then when we come back, we'll talk a little bit, and I'm going to read a sort of biography of Voltz that was written by a mutual friend of ours, and then we'll play my track and then move on. But yeah, did you? I'm guessing that you learned about Voltz through my show. Had you heard of him before?
Well, it wasn't so much through the show; it was through the Discord server.
Yeah,
you know, Because, like, when I first joined up, I was like, oh, you know, like, these people seem kind of cool. Because, like, I'm honestly, like, and I know it's, like, probably one of my worst traits. I'm not a community person at all. Like, I don't follow fandoms of things. I basically only had Discord so I could play Borderlands with my friends. And then, so yeah, I joined the Bedroth server, and I'm like, hey, look at all these people. And, it's... The thing that I like about it is, it's not... it's not like a fandom about a specific game, or... it's about music as a whole. And, like you were saying, there's composers, there's arrangers, there's just fans of music in there. Like, honestly, it's a great place to be, and I need to be there more.
Well, thank you. I wish that a lot more people would come in and join. I mean, I don't want it to get super overblown or anything like that, but none of the VGM podcast servers really are. The biggest one I'm on is probably the Super Marcato Bros Discord, and even that one is just, it feels like a tight-knit, almost little family of listeners. But what I do love about my server, which I think comes from the fact that I was already a fan in the VGM podcast scene for so long, is like you said, we have composers, we have arrangers, we have podcasters, we just have fans. We have, like, Forrest is a YouTuber. He actually produces a really funny pair of shows on YouTube that they're on a little bit of a hiatus right now because he has some behind the scenes stuff going on too. But we'll put some links in the show notes this time. This is the patron show after all, but it's a really cool place, and I love listening to, or I love hearing from the people who listen to the show. That's really one of the things that keeps me going. If I have only my 7 patrons for the rest of the time the show plays, but I have people interacting with me, I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to keep doing it. So thank you for that plug there.
Yeah, no problem. I kind of went off on a tangent there. But yeah, like the point was, like, you have the promote yourself section in your Discord, and Voltz had posted this, I don't even remember what it was, but when I listened to it, I was like, oh, I'll check out all his stuff. And yeah, like, I listened to Caveman Boy, and I listened to well, we'll get to the one that you picked. But yeah, this one that I picked, One Shot Jones. Love this song. Love it. Let's get to it.
Okay, so One Shot Jones originally comes from a project called Mighty Beats, which is inspired largely by the Scott Pilgrim game and other similar side-scrolling beat-em-ups like Streets of Rage, that kind of stuff. Anyway, the idea of the game was that each level would have its own theme based on a musical genre, and I was given the job of composing for the Western level. I'd previously released a Western music pack for indie developers on some game development asset stores, and that's what the lead developer had come across and liked. Now, I really love composing Western music, but it is a pretty broad genre of music. I definitely lean very heavily towards the Ennio Morricone spaghetti Western style of Western music. But anyway, long story short, myself and the developer had some communication problems. I composed a number of tracks for this project, but none of them fit what the developer had in mind. I was under the impression that he wanted music like what I'd composed for in my Western pack, which he said he really liked, which is much less country music and more spaghetti Western. But yeah, after a lot of back and forth, sending demo tracks, getting feedback, sending new songs, kind of over and over again for a couple of weeks, eventually I discovered that he really wanted something more like a pop song by a country hard rock band or something that really didn't sound like it was written for a game, but it was a song kind of brought in from a country rock band. I don't know, like, he wasn't very clear with what he wanted at the beginning, and I probably made a lot of false assumptions, which was a mistake on my behalf. But anyway, I haven't officially left that project, and they're still going. They're focusing on other levels and have been for about 3 years now. But I just repurposed all the demos I'd made for that game into some more songs to put in the music pack, which has ended up working very well, as it's my most popular music pack. So this song, One Shot Jones, came somewhere in the middle of this whole experience, in between thinking they wanted Western music and then finding out it was supposed to be more hard rock country. And you can kind of hear that it kind of sits between those genres a little bit. It was supposed to be a boss track, the boss is actually a country singer with a guitar, so he's a bit more cheesy than sinister, and that's why the music doesn't really sound too intense. One of the things I did do was make the percussion kind of sound like stomping and clapping. My intention with that was that it would sound like it was coming from a crowd of people like surrounding you, like a bar fight kind of thing. So I don't know, hopefully that comes across. I also like that these Western songs have a lot of live recorded parts, which is not too common for most of my video game music. But anyway, guys and listeners, thanks for letting me explain this track. I hope you all enjoy One Shot Jones.
That was One Shot Jones. And that's from the video game music pack, Western Music. We'll talk a little about that here in a second, but man, that was fun.
Yeah, wasn't that awesome?
So good, man. But yeah, I listened to several of the tracks in this pack, and I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't know if I just leapfrogged over this one, but I feel like this one would have stuck. What? You talk. This is your track. Tell me about your reasons for this, and what do you love about this so much?
Well, and I guess we'll get to it next, but like, part of the reason that I brought it to the show, I mean, part of it is just because it's an awesome song, but you know, part of it is you know, it's like spaghetti western kind of song, done by an Australian, brought to you by a Canadian. So, like, I'm just kind of wondering what, you know, an authentic Texan thinks of it. But I mean, more so than anything, like, you take the title of it, One Shot Jones, and you listen to the music, and, like, it paints a perfect picture of, like, the story of One Shot Jones, like, you know, being in the bar or whatever, and the sheriff comes, and, like, you can hear, like, the stare down, like, in the middle of the dusty road when they're, you know, draw, pilgrim, kind of thing. To me, I hear a story in this song. And the story, like, because, you know, like, when the guitar part comes in the middle, and, like, it gets all intense, and then at the end, it goes back to that main, like, the riff in the beginning. To me, that's sort of like, okay, he beat the sheriff, and now he's just riding off to his next adventure kind of thing. So, like, to me, it's a story. That's what I heard in it. And I love the instrumentation. I love everything about this song.
It's so good, and Voltz is so good at telling stories in his music. He's such a smart dude. His entertainment skills are top notch. He's a DJ, he's a producer, he's a composer, and he's played with live bands. He has a band with some friends in the town that he is from. Trying to remember, Wollongong, I believe, is the name of the town, and they have recorded, I think it's like 80 albums, and I'm not exaggerating.
Oh, wow.
He talks about that in his most recent episode as we're recording this, which he recorded with his friend who goes by Okie Doke, is his sort of public persona. But seriously, this guy needs more of a following. He's got 334 subscribers on YouTube, and I don't know why it's not at least 10 times that much. His talent is just immense, and I love his work. His podcast is fantastic. If you want some good music, and if you want a laugh, and if you want to hear some really excellent character work, go and listen to Voltz Supreme's Synth VGM Dream Stream Machine podcast. There is some really, really great stuff on there. You will not be disappointed. And the backlog is not that huge either. He's been doing this for about as long as I have, maybe a little bit longer, and so, you know, it's really, really, really great stuff. I think this is probably a good time to go into a little bit of Voltz's backstory. So, and this is from a mutual friend of ours, Utopia Nemo, who is an uber fan of the VGM podcast community, has guested on several shows, and is always interacting in the Discords. He's a really cool guy. He and his kids are big fans of Voltz's podcast, and so here's what Utopia Nemo has to say about Voltz Supreme, the man, the myth, and the legend.
Voltz Supreme, host of the Synth VGM Dream Stream Machine podcast, is one of the more prolifically diverse and enigmatic VGM podcast hosts broadcasting content on the interwebs. Since his pilot podcast episode debuted in February of 2020, he's interviewed some of the most distinctive and wide-ranging guests about video game music. From world-class chef and music producer Oliver Ackhurst, to one-time well-dweller Little Thomas Thunbergen, to the legendary hip-hop historian and Brooklyn Karate Dojo master Donnie Smalls. While his early years are shrouded in mystery, Voltz's meteoric rise to stardom began with the production of the now mythical hip-hop debut album Full Ghetto, from the celebrated rap group Brooklyn BCMCs back in 1988 to 1990. It was reported by Mr. Smalls that Voltz had actually recorded most or all of the vocals for the BCMCs on Full Ghetto under the nom de plume MC Boo Boo Plaster. Mr. Supreme's whereabouts between 1990 and the podcast's launch in 2020 are mostly unknown, although it's obvious from the show's broad spectrum of guests that he was no doubt cultivating his list of contacts and sources. Aside from running a podcast show, Voltz is also a talented composer and synth aficionado. His synth unboxing videos frequently garner millions of views, causing bandwidth issues for YouTube, Dailymotion, and Vimeo. He's meticulously composed scores of scores for such widely popular games as Adam's Ascending and Caveman Boy, as well as producing covers of tracks from lesser-known games like Final Fantasy VI and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Voltz Supreme's areas of focus in the podcast industry are incredibly diverse, leading some to question whether he's a real person or a fabrication of highly skilled marketing experts. Not only has Mr. Supreme interviewed celebrities like surfing superstar and California Games apologist Seth Curry, and controversial taxidermist Dr. Murray Swilcho, he even brokered one of the first on-air synthetic romances between AI robots Carmel and Clip Trip. Perhaps the most astounding of all, however, is that he seems to have achieved repeated contact with himself in other universes. Aside from Voltz, the Synth VGM Dream Stream Machine podcast host, we've listened to Mr. Supreme broadcast live from the Unicornopolis Galaxy as the boozy host of Voltz Supreme Synth VGM Dream Stream Machine's Super Space Ace Radio Rodeo broadcast. And we've listened to him DJ as erstwhile SS Ranchmount submarine pilot and Schnog initiate Voltz from the inky depths of the Black Sub-Oceans. Heck, we've even commiserated with him as he tried to get a job at the Crispy Kraken, a bar on the villainous Scum Island, back in ye olden pirate days. One can only guess what Voltz Supreme, if that is his real name, will come up with next.
Yeah, I can't really add much of anything to that. So, you know what? I'll just go ahead and lead into to my song of Voltz's. This is from a game that came out, I believe it was earlier this year. This game is called Adam's Ascending. I haven't played it, but you can go check it out, go look it up. The soundtrack, though, is really good stuff. And Voltz actually had a couple of things to say about these songs, and so we will hear Voltz's words about this track when we come back from Final Ascent.
So interesting that this song got chosen. Adam's Ascending was a pretty big project for an indie game. The developer Nick DiPaolo was really ambitious, and it ended up being a bit of a No Man's Sky kind of situation when it came out. It was his first proper game he developed, and he was basically starting from zero development experience and trying to pull off this massive third-person sci-fi adventure. To his credit, he really persisted with this game for many years and came a long way with it. I think there's some really cool ideas in this game, and it has a lot of potential still, but unfortunately, it was released via the Steam Early Access thing, and in its state, it's pretty broken. I'd love to share this game with people. I spent a long time working on the soundtrack for it, but it's just got some really serious issues that need fixing before I can honestly recommend that anyone check it out. I think the main issue for me is that there's no save function in the game, and when you release a game early access full of bugs, being able to save or having an auto save function for me is pretty essential. So anyway, this could have been a pretty great game, but I think it was just way too ambitious for one developer. So, but you can go check it out. I think it's pretty cheap. It's less than $10. So unfortunately, this game in its current state, it hasn't got much love, and the soundtrack hasn't got much attention either. I kind of knew that when I was releasing the soundtrack, which was supposed to be just for Adams Ascending Episode 1, I think I really knew that this would be it and that there would not be an Episode 2 soundtrack, which is why I included a lot of tracks that never actually got used in the early access game. And this track that you've chosen, Bedroth, is actually one of those tracks. So the scene it was supposed to be in was like this last run towards the peak of this kind of supernatural mountain, which is like a centerpiece of this island you find yourself on. And you kind of unlock this mountain as you complete the game. Probably doesn't make much sense, and I don't really have time to go into it, but essentially this level or this scene in the game was a bit like a montage, and you'd be running up this hill and all these images from your past gameplay experience would appear either side of you as you were going up, and you'd kind of go through sections of all the different not worlds, but places you'd experienced playing the game. So the song has a bit of a cheesy montage vibe to it. I think my favorite part is the big ultra cheesy drum fill just before the big 80s style synthwave drums come back in. Anyway, look, this scene never got included in the early access version, so it's technically not in the game. So there's not a lot to say about it, but hey, I hope you enjoy.
So I think this definitely has that sort of mysterious, desolate, but epic sounding motif that you want in that sort of music. What did you think of this one, Troy?
Oh, for sure. I also just looking at the the album art on YouTube. You see this futuristic looking guy at the bottom of this spacey looking mountain, and again, the music goes perfectly with that, because you get the tribal drums going, right? And that it gives you a very primitive vibe to it, and then all these lush synths come in, and you get the spaceman kind of vibe. And I absolutely love how with a game called Adams Ascending, how he uses the main melody in different octaves.
Oh yeah,
to give that feeling of ascension.
Voltz is a master synth chef. That is his modus operandi. It's definitely his instrument of choice. And my favorite part of this whole thing was when the drums came in between the 2-minute and 2:30 mark.
Oh, I stopped paying attention because I was air drumming.
It's just so good. And that's one of the things I love about this medium, is you can have the backing of a gigantic corporation that's been around for decades like Capcom, and have access to recording studios like Abbey Road, and the Monster Hunter Rise soundtrack, as we mentioned, is fantastic. But this, that was made by one guy in his studio, is as good as anything we have listened to tonight. This was phenomenal. And that's one of the things I love. If you have got the talent and the ability to to use the tools that are just so freely at our disposal now, you can come up with something just great. And I wish that this had as many listeners as the Monster Hunter soundtrack does, because I think if more people knew about Voltz's music, we would hear a lot more of it, and that would be a win-win for everybody. So, Ryan, thank you so much for recommending Voltz to us. Utopian Nemo, thank you for sharing those thoughts about Voltz and his background. Voltz, thank you for being such an awesome person. And Skeletroy, do you have anything else you would like to say about Voltz and his music before we move on to our last composer of the show?
Thanks for doing what you do, and keep it up.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, both of our last two tracks are going to be chosen by my special co-host because they are from the composer that he recommended for the show. And I'm going to let you decide the order, let you talk about them a little bit, because I don't have any experience with this composer. I have a little bit of experience, as most of our generation does, with this game series. But who are we going to be talking about to close out the show?
So we're gonna go with Kazunaka Yamane. He did most of the Double Dragon series, except the third one, the bad one. No, I know there's people that like that one. And yeah, like he even came out of retirement to do the soundtrack for Double Dragon 4. And there are a lot of new songs in that, but yeah, I guess we'll just go with that one. So from Double Dragon 4, this is the theme of Williams and Linda, although probably most of you just know it as like the Stage 1 theme from Double Dragon. And we're back with the theme of Williams and Linda from Double Dragon 4, although you can find that in, I think 3 or 4 different Double Dragon games. I really like the one from Double Dragon Neon, but I went with this one just because I feel like this is almost how I heard these songs when I was a kid. Like going back to to the NES version and especially the arcade version. Like I have fond memories of that, but geez, those instruments don't sound good. You listen to the arcade version of that guitar solo, that's good. It sounds like bees in your brain.
Yeah, it's not super great with the earbuds, but it is really cool when these composers can come back and do this fully realized version of this. I mentioned that back on the Yasunori Mitsuda episode when he released the albums in the 2010s. There was a tribute album to the music of Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross that he released in 2015, 20 years after the release of Chrono Trigger, and he said that is when he feels like they were finally realized. And I believe it was on the Olympics episode again, I played a version of the Final Fantasy title theme from Final Fantasy VIII, and I specifically picked that one because Uematsu said that is when he feels like his composition was fully realized. So it's really cool to hear Yamane come back and be able to fully realize his still very, very 80s inspired rockin' soundtrack. But man, that guitar solo was... we don't use words like this very often on the podcast, but there is not a better word for that guitar solo than bitchin'. That was amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of those songs that, like, I can firmly point at and be like, this is why I like video game music.
It's a classic, yeah.
Yeah, it's just great. Like, I had the Game Boy version of Double Dragon, and even that one sounds good.
I'm not a huge fan of these kinds of lists because they're so subjective, but if I were going to make a list of, like, these are, let's say, the 25 songs from a video game that you still remember that you heard growing up, this would be on that list. Like, even for guys like me, who... I never played a whole lot of Double Dragon because beat-em-ups weren't as much my jam. I was an only child, and so I didn't have a whole lot of people to play them with. But even I know this song. Like, I've known this song for 30 years. Oh, man. That's really cool, though. So we're going to go from Double Dragon 4 to Double Dragon 2, it looks like. What are we going to be moving on to next?
Yeah, so, I guess, we're gonna be chilling out a bit more for, the last song of this episode. To be honest, like, there's really nothing flashy about this one, but, like, if it doesn't get your head bobbing, I've done something wrong. This is, Mission 2 from Double Dragon 2 The Revenge. Although in the arcade, this was the song from Mission 1.
Okay, and what version are we going to be listening to?
The NES one. Because, again, I don't like the sound of bees in my brain.
All right. Well, let's go and listen to the NES version of this mission's music from Double Dragon 2 The Revenge.
So, we're back, and that was Mission 2 from Double Dragon 2 The Revenge. I love that bass line. It's so good. Like, everything else on top of it, like, I feel just kind of gets you, like, going. But, like, the bass, it's so good.
It is. We've had some nice bass on this episode, and I'm glad we got to get a little bit of that sweet triangle bass from the NES before we close things out. This is such a nostalgic sound font for me, and you could tell. I mean, Yamane knew what he was doing with this sound chip. This was good stuff.
And the other thing that I really liked about this is at the very end where like, I guess it would be like that arpeggiated part, and then it just kind of leads back into the loop. Because I find that, like, it breaks it up really well, but at the same time, like, this is one of those songs that you can kind of listen to over and over. Like, it's almost a perfect loop, even though it has a specific break in it.
Yeah, the loop it's deceptive in that way, and that is one of my favorite things about some of these old, of course this was a claim, but these old, like the Konami and Capcom, the side-scrollers and things like that, is you could listen to them for 30 seconds or you could listen to them for 5 minutes, and it was about the same. They were really skillfully put together and very nicely done, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a good track.
Oh, I'm glad you dug it. It was weird, because when I initially picked Yamane, like the original Double Dragon soundtrack, like the whole thing, it means a lot to me. As, you know, like as I was saying, like it was where I really first started paying attention to video game music. But like it almost legitimized video game music for me. Just in terms of how the compositions were. You know, it was a lot closer to being like songs that you'd hear on the radio.
Yeah.
Rather than just little loops. And I find Double Dragon 2 kind of takes a step back in that sense. Like, these are definitely video game loops. But yeah, I mean, a good song's a good song.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. And I did listen through to Yamane's playlist as well. With some help from a fan, I might be able to put together a full list. I could definitely do a Double Dragon series showcase on the show. His other work was a little bit more hit and miss. You mentioned like the one-hit wonder concept, and I guess in this case, the one hit would be the series. But it's I did feature a song on my... I've started recently doing a random BGM of the day on Twitter and Discord, and a few days ago I did feature a song called Kuniotachi no Banka from the Super Famicom game Shin Neketsu Kuha. The English name of the track is Beauty and the Beast. This was composed by Yamane, and it was really fun. That soundtrack it's different. It's pretty cool. This particular track I liked quite a bit. The one soundtrack that he did that really resonated with me because it was kind of nostalgic for me. I think it's the only one of these games I played a lot when I was a kid, but that's the soundtrack for Super Spike V-Ball.
Yeah.
Are you familiar at all with that one?
Yeah, I actually was really close to picking the ending credits theme from that, because that's, again, just a really good song. I haven't played much of the game, to be honest. But I listened to the whole soundtrack, and, yeah, like, that credits theme is so good.
The ending theme is really good. One of the matches, I want to say maybe... I also like the game mode select. I came close to that one, I think. But either the Vegas match or the Los Angeles match. These tracks, though, I mean, this was 88, 89, and the songs in Super Spike V-Ball are much shorter loops, except for the ending credits theme. But I did play this quite a bit when, growing up. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but the sprites were nice. It was fun. It's one of those titles that it's kind of like it's Kunio adjacent. The characters looked like Kunio characters, and so, I mean, Double Dragon and Kunio-kun are two of the biggest retro game series, and so I think having some representation in both of those, Yamane is probably better known than most of the other composers on this list, just because of the pedigree of these games. So, a nice way to close out the night, I think.
Indeed.
And yeah, so on that note, Skeletroy, thank you once again for joining me. I'm excited because this is not the last that our listeners are going to hear from you this month. You're actually going to be coming back next week as we talk about one of our mutual favorite composers, this time with Shoot Kapow in tow. Who are we going to be talking about 1 week from today?
Oh, this is going to be fun. We're going to be talking about Naoki Kodaka.
And this has been a long time coming. Naoki Kodaka is the composer who just might have brought us together. When I first started the show, I wasn't really on social media yet, but one thing that I was kind of doing to network is I was really exploring the VGM cover arrangement and remix community on YouTube, listening to a lot of stuff, commenting on things, and just kind of, putting some feelers out there to see who else was kind of in the scene. And I came across your Thrash Remix channel, and specifically some of your work on Kodaka's tracks. And Kodaka is my favorite NES composer. I'm on the record saying that on BG Mania, the show that Brian from episode 3 of this season hosts. And I just can't wait. This is going to be a blast. Now, speaking of blast, there are only 2 tracks on next week's playlist that are not going to be chosen by you, and those are the tracks from Journey to Silius and Blaster Master. And I've got kind of a special surprise in store there, but all the rest of the playlist is stuff strictly from you, because I've already gotten to kind of help curate a playlist of Kodaka tracks on another podcast, and I'm sure I'm going to play more of my own favorites on this show, like I already have, but I really wanted to hear, because I know you love Kodaka a lot, I wanted to hear what you had to say about him, so I'm excited. I'm not going to spoil too much more right now, because everybody will get to hear it next week, but really excited about that. And we've got some fun stuff planned for the rest of the season. We have a couple more bonus episodes, as I've mentioned, one around Halloween and one late in November, probably around Thanksgiving, where we're going to feature some of Shoot Kapow's and my own compositions. I'm a little nervous about that one, but not for his tracks, because they're good, but mine are... It's been a while since I did anything musical, so we'll have to see if these stand up. I have a couple more guest spots with Alex Messenger, who I mentioned is going to be talking about Mick Gordon with me, and Prof. Jeff is going to be discussing one of our favorite composers, who is also one of Shoot Kapow's. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But of course, episode 11 of this season would not be complete without my episode 11 guest, Prof. Jeff. A couple of really big name composers who we're going to be taking some specific looks at later this season. And possibly an interview in the works with a composer who a lot of you know and will enjoy quite a bit. But yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and give one more shout out to my patrons. Thank you all so much for making this episode possible. SprintCade, thank you again for your recommendation of Satoshi Hori. Forrest, thank you for bringing Mike Beckett to our attention. And best of luck in your future endeavors with The Bomb Show and with Castle Core. And I know that fairly recently, you have... moved. Your homestead is now in a different state, so hopefully that is all going well. Thank you so much for continuing to support us during that time. Carlos, Kung Fu Carlito, my buddy, my good pal, thank you for Toshiya Yamanaka. Really, really enjoyed his music, and best of luck to you on your Heroes 3 podcast that I have talked about on the show quite a bit. Ryan, thank you not only for composing one of my favorite games that I've played this year and one of my favorite soundtracks in Catlandia Crisis at 4 Paw Print, but also for bringing our mutual podcast fan, my fellow podcaster, and just all-around amazing composer, Voltz Supreme. And Troy, thank you for joining me on the show, for coming back next week, and for bringing some Kazunaka Yamane. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Alex the Messenger, patron saint of VGM podcasts, and as always, the mysterious Nathan. And yeah, I think that's it as far as patrons. I also really appreciate our artists. Also, Skeletroy, one of which you are, as my theme song guy. But thank you, Naomi and Ben, and again, Carlos, for the artwork that you bring to the show. And I think that's about it for me. Troy, you'll be back next week, but is there anything that you would like to plug in particular?
Geez, not at the moment. I got everything under wraps. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Skeletroy. There will be new stuff there sometime soon.
Ring that notification bell so that you'll find out when the new stuff comes out.
I can't say when for sure, but it'll be soon.
Oh, I will definitely be there to check that out.
And, yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's been a blast.
Been a pleasure. We'll have to not wait, what's it been, 8 months before you come back after the Kodaka episode. And, yeah, well, then I think all that's left is, as always, everyone, play very good games.
Be very good people.
And keep listening to very good music. I'll go ahead and do the intro then, and you'll just, you'll say Shukapau's lines in the intro and outro, I guess. So, greetings gamers, I'm Bedroth, you're Skeletroy. You're listening to very good music, and then you say a BGM podcast, and then we just kind of start. And
I got I'm a pro by now.
By now,
this is
yeah.
my second episode.
It is. Again, this song has a really nice sense of evolution to it, a really nice build. It's I'm trying to find my words. I just had to shoo one of my kids.
It's that good that it left him speechless.
I had to shoo one of my kids away, and I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, oh, that's what I was gonna say. I just realized I think I've got the back of my mic facing me, which might be why I'm so quiet. But we will, it actually matters with my new mic, because it's not omnidirectional. But, well, maybe our Kodaka episode I'll sound just slightly better, but we'll see. Alright, so you can read us back in whenever you are ready, sir. This is from a game that came out, I believe it was earlier in 2020. Have not played the game, but you can go...
Oh, you did that pandemic skip a year thing, didn't you?
Oh, I did. Did I say
2021, and almost the end of 2021.
It's earlier in 2021. Well, there's something for the blooper reel, at least. But